And now it is my pleasure to introduce our next conversation, the courage to create work you love. Sweta is a former professor of pharmacy and clinical and residency director turned speaker, author, life and leadership coach. Since 2013, she has guided seasoned professionals, budding creatives, and entrepreneurs to recognize what holds them back and helps illuminate how to bridge from reluctant or dutiful leader to a natural leader by supporting them to reveal their authentic brilliance. She's the author of the book, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, Now What? And contributor to the award-winning anthology, She's Got This, Essays on Standing Strong and Moving On. She has published articles and essays in several journals, magazines, and has spoken on many stages and panels, including the White House. Welcome, Sweta. Moderating this conversation, let's welcome back to the stage Power to Fly's virtual event host, Meg. Please take it away. And as always, it's a pleasure to see you here. And I'm looking forward to learning with you all in this next conversation.
Oh, thank you so much, Mariella. I cannot wait to dive in with Dr. Swetza today. Now, Dr. Swetza, Mariella gave you a great introduction. Is there anything else that you think our audience should know about you before we dive into this amazing topic today?
I just want to say, it's such an honor to be here and to talk about this, especially during such a pivotal time, during this, great resignation, great awakening, great reshuffle, however you want to call it. Reinventing how we work and lead is something that I've been passionate about for the last 8 to 9 years. So my hope is that as you listen to what I share is to just take notice of maybe like the 1 or 2 things that really speak to you, because, the best learning, the best growth happens when it's actionable. And so, when we get overwhelmed, that's a way that we, get in our own way. But if you can just really connect to yourself and what are the 1 or 2 things that resonate for you, and I think you'll really gain a lot from our time together.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So, one of the things that Mariella talked about is how you're now a leadership coach, and you help people to reinvent how they really work and lead. So can you share with us some of what you feel are like the kind of most common mistakes that people make when they're trying to find more of that meaning or satisfaction at work?
Yes. So I actually just wrote a blog on this, the 7 most common mistakes that I see when people are looking to reinvent how they work and lead. And that's something that I'll put some resources that people can check that out. But I want to share with you the most common one I see, which is they look for external data instead of internal data. And what I mean by that is oftentimes, if we're in a place where we're feeling dissatisfied with our work, or you're questioning, like I said, we're in this time where people are looking deeper at the meaning of work, we automatically look towards the solution. So that can look like, how can I better myself, right? What training do I need to get? What letters, what are the degrees? What kind of jobs out there maybe that will help me to, that I'm qualified for, where I can make a change, where maybe that will make me to feel more satisfied. Or, we listen to other people's advice, for example, right? And this is something that I did when I was I worked for a decade at a university. I was a professor of pharmacy. And the first 3 years, I really loved my job. But after some time, I started to not enjoy going to work so much. And I did all of those things. I started to get certification, add extra letters behind my name, thinking that if I achieved more, if I did more, that maybe then I would feel satisfaction. And it wasn't until I went on a sabbatical and I took some time for some self-reflection. And it was incredible because what I discovered was that a lot of the steps I was taking were towards, kind of growing, going up the academic ladder, the academic corporate ladder, thinking that, that is where I would find that happiness, because that's what we're told to do, right? Like just, let's improve ourselves more. Let's try to grow in that way. But what I discovered was that I was moving away from the work that I really loved. The first 3 years, I was doing work that was hands-on. I was being collaborative. I was being innovative. And when I started to kind of follow the steps of climbing the ladder, it was a lot more administrative. It was a lot more publishing. It was things that really didn't light me up. And I really believe when you're not like lit up, it's hard to have impact for yourself and for organizations and for the people that you work with. being able to recognize that helped me to have the clarity to come back from my sabbatical with a new vision for myself. And with that clarity, I was able to, ask for different projects. I was able to share ideas. I was able to leverage my time and my work so that it was doing more of what I call, expressing my unique brilliance. And as a result, it like made me happier. I enjoyed going back to work more, but it also had a greater impact. I was, made a lot of innovations in my own field. And I really see this across the board, even with clients that I work with. And, when I was ready to, then I got to a point, I stayed at the university for 3 more years and I was very happy with my work. And then when I hit another career crossroad, which happens, right? There's not this one line trajectory of success. This time I decided to get help. So, which is something that was new to me. I'm somebody that, this is another common mistake that I see a lot of people make, is that they isolate instead of engage. And I decided to work with a coach, and I saw the power of self-inquiry. It was something that I did during my sabbatical, but it wasn't at the forefront of how I operated. And I saw that how asking the right questions so that you can get your data, like your own personal data. And I'm talking specifics. I'm not talking about general things. A lot of people will say, like, take a strength finders test, right? That your strength is connection, for example. But here's the reason why you want to get specific. This is something I do with my clients. I give them worksheets to help them identify the specificities. I have a client that I'm working with right now who's at a career crossroads. One of his strengths is connection. But what we discovered was that he likes to design places for connection as opposed to like being a networker. That was really important data, because when he was thinking about the crossroads that he could, go down, he would have been miserable, in some of the choices that he was considering. But by realizing that specificity, it was so empowering for him as well. And so I really believe in pausing, taking some time for self-reflection, the power of self-inquiry. I believe in it so much that I even wrote, my whole book is all about that. So it's 21 like short stories with inquiry questions for you to help on your own self-discovery journey.
Ooh, I like that. And you hit on something really, really great there, which is, granted, we're at a time where we've got more generations involved in the working world than we've ever had before. But the idea behind what you're talking about is huge, right? So much of what we're taught about success or, being a professional or, kind of growing your career or impressing people with, what you've done is about climbing that ladder. And it is kind of a very, I would say, monotonous path. Like it's very, it's one of those things where once you start down that path, it's easier to follow because there's a lot of people treading it. And, I totally get why it kind of takes over, or at least takes precedence. Are you finding that you're having less of a situation with like maybe younger clients who were not raised on this idea of like, you find a job, you stay there till, for 25, 35 years, get the gold watch, and then you retire? Are you finding that difference in age really correlates to a different viewpoint or a different attitude when it comes to a career?
That is such a good question. Yes. So first I want to speak to how you were saying about like how following kind of the corporate ladder. And, that's why the name of my book is called I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, Now What? Because many people, myself included, it's like you follow all the steps, you have the quote unquote success. And then you're like, okay, well, why don't I feel the way that I'm supposed to be feeling? And with regards to your second question about kind of this new generation, I have the luxury of being part of Gen X. So I am in between the baby boomers and the millennials. And so, and I'm an immigrant, I'm an, Asian immigrant. So hard work, opportunity, just work hard, you'll be successful, has been embedded in my cells, right? But I grew up in the US. And so I watched all the movies and the shows, and I heard all the like, follow your dreams, et cetera. And so it's like those in between stories. And I think that, yes, there definitely is like a different motivation for the younger generation. But, I do find if there's certain cultures that you're a part of, like the Asian culture, right? It's embedded, even no matter what generation you're in, it actually, that work hard and follow these steps is still like part of the narrative. And honestly, I think it's very confusing when you have two different stories going on. Right. Yeah. And the problem with that is that again, we go outside and we try to solve the solution, and we create these habits. Like we can become perfectionistic, or we can become overperforming, or we can become people pleasing. We're disconnected from ourselves. We're disconnected from our own truth and what's true for us. Sometimes we do need to work harder, right? Sometimes it requires us to actually let go and have more passion, and let's lead with more joy. I don't think it's a black and white answer. It's very, custom to you. That's why it comes back to knowing yourself, knowing your story, where, what are the narratives that you were told growing up, and what is your truth? Because I have a little bit, I call myself a conforming rebel. Because like I followed the footsteps, right? So like even within farming, I followed, became a doctor like my family wanted me to do, but I went into academia, which was so not actually in my culture, in my upbringing. But really being able to identify what is your motivation, what's driving you. Is it the, what the stories you're hearing from home? Is it what society is telling you? What's your truth? Like what really, drives you? And I think, again, having that pause is so important to reflect on that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. All right. So something you were talking about in your answer there kind of like pinged something for me. So you're talking about how, in the culture in which you were raised was a lot of that, work hard, put in the work, nose to the grindstone, all that kind of stuff. And then you will get to that, that American dream or whatever. When you think of these kind of cultural ideas in context as, somebody who identifies as AAPI, someone who is an immigrant to the country, why do you think things like the model minority myth become incredibly problematic for that population? Because there's so many people that come here thinking like, yeah, you just work hard. And then it becomes a huge thing of assimilation, right? Absolutely. So how do you think that plays?
The model minority myth is so incredibly destructive for so many reasons, because if, it's this, again, a stereotype and this perception that all Asians are overachievers and super self-sufficient and they're good workers. And if you're somebody who doesn't fall into that, right? Like I think about my own child. My child is, he's half Asian, he's not full Asian, but he has learning differences. His brain works completely different. And if all of his value is based on this perception of how he should be doing in school, if I wasn't able to look beyond that, the amount of, how that would deny his own special uniqueness, the self-esteem issues that he would have, the self-worth issues that he would have would be tremendous. Because if you don't fit into that, that's this idea of like belonging. I don't fit into this societal perception of how I'm supposed to be. Then who am I? Where am I? I'm not enough, right? That's the story that comes up a lot. And again, it perpetuates like people pleasing and perfectionism and overperforming. And it's all about this performance of who I need to be versus who I am. And it breeds a whole culture of people who think that their value and their worth comes from being a good worker. And it denies helping them to step into what I call your own natural leadership, which is, and when you don't do that, like not only do you feel bad about the work you do, we miss out on your brilliance because, you're working so hustling for worthiness, working so hard to live up to an image versus the gifts that you actually have.
Yeah, you spend all the time chasing that. You don't have any time or breathing space or anything left to think about like, what are you actually doing? And so much of it is chasing either that gold ring. We hear, it was Tiger Moms was a big thing that, America finally learned about. What was that, like probably 7 or 8 years ago? And so you do have that situation where you're right. You kind of lose any opportunity to see where else you might be happy or what else might really light you up, as opposed to spending all of your time and focus on trying to prove that you belong, prove that it's okay for you to be there.
The highest rate of suicide is among American Asian college students.
Sadly, that does not surprise me.
Yeah.
Very sadly.
The pressure is real. The pressure is real. And, I talked a little bit about isolating instead of engaging. Things are slowly changing, mental health awareness, I know that's come up.
Thank God.
As well, but there still is a lot of stigma in certain cultures around, getting help. I know that even when I was in my career, the thought of asking for help never crossed my mind. Never crossed my mind, because somehow it would mean that I was weak. I wasn't good enough. My value came from being able to hold it together and figure it out. I mean, it wasn't until I was 10 years into my career did I actually seek help and get like a coach, because I had my own personal, it was very vulnerable for me of there's something wrong with me because I need guidance.
Oh my gosh, I can't, the mental health thing is huge for me. Like it's one of those things that's like a huge linchpin in my life. And you're right. It does lead you into, the lack of awareness around things like mental health does lead you into some of the more problematic situations. And it just becomes one of those things that kind of builds on itself. Right. Yes. If that's not really seen as an option or anything that's really understood for like your parents' generation, it's going to be a lot harder for you to kind of be the person that ventures into this new territory, especially when it's something as loaded as mental health that, kind of is, at least hopefully not anymore, but was seen so much as like a puff thing of like, well, I get that you're not happy, but everybody's not happy. Like, you just need to work harder. You just need to try harder, and then you'll get to that job that'll make you happy. All right. So let's kind of change gears here and talk a little bit about natural leadership. Now you think that I've read some of your stuff on your blog, and you talk about how it's essential for really creating work that you love. So let's expand on that idea. Like, how do you define natural leadership? And do you think it's something that people can achieve?
Absolutely. The way I define natural leadership is about letting go of what holds you back from really accepting, like having that self-awareness, accepting and allowing your own brilliant, unique expression in service to contributing and influencing culture in a positive way. Again, when I don't believe leadership is a title. So many of us, believe that leadership is about a title. Like I'm a director, I'm in the C-suite, et cetera. And that you have, when you think about leader, right, we have so many perceptions of what a leader looks like, how they talk, right, what they look like, how they sound, what their voice sounds like. And those types of things, get in the way of us being able to see our own leadership. I believe that we're all uniquely designed, and we're uniquely designed for a reason. We have the life experiences that we've gone through make us who we are. And when you lead with that, when you can see that, when you can see your own story, when you can see your own brilliance, it is not only empowering, but again, it serves us. I facilitate for a global national company, and we have this whole 9 month, it's amazing. This company's invested in their people, and it's like a 9-month leadership identity work. And I work with lots of women in Asia. And one of the very first things that we start with, this is leadership training, okay, is your story. That's the first thing that we start with. And I just recently posted a video on LinkedIn that, oftentimes, imposter syndrome comes up a lot, right? Where it's like, we lack the qualities, or we don't have enough of being a certain way, or the degrees or the experiences to be able to maybe make a change or to step up, whether that's step up in your own career, maybe make a change or make a switch. And we think that it's all based on like our resume, right? That our resume is our identity, but it's not. Like, who you are and your story is your identity. And when you're able to see that, and you're able to move away from performance, but actually leverage your authenticity, not only is it, again, empowering, but it's like you actually contribute, to the world. I'll give you an example. I recently, joined a workspace where I was the only woman of color. And people, were kind of like, well, why? Some friends were like, why would you join that space? Right. And I said, I don't know. My judgments want to come up as well. But, talk about courage, right? So courage comes from this place in the heart. My heart feels a connection to this space. And I, spoke to the owner very directly. And I said, people are questioning why I'm joining this space, being a woman of color. And I said, I have learned for me that my activism as a woman of color is to take up more space. And that's why I am why I'm enjoying this place. And it was amazing because I believe she was in her natural leadership. And she said, and I know that there's going to be a ripple effect because of that. And there was, that space elevated my voice. I am now a mentor for that space. And, majority of the mentors are women of color.
Oh, see, this is the stuff that's absolutely amazing. You're right. Cause you're right. I mean, it can be very, very vulnerable to step into a space like that. Because who knows if you're going to be welcome or not, but like, it's scary.
Yeah. And, and the way to get to that, to your natural, because if you're wondering, how do you get to your natural leadership, right? It's about taking your brilliance out of the shadow, right? So in my story, is like, I don't belong, right? I'm too much. I shouldn't take up too much space. Right. And that held me back. But when I took that out of the shadow and my uniqueness, right, gave in my pain of not belonging is giving me a purpose to, again, contribute and influence society and culture. Today I'm a leadership coach, and I tell my son all the time, I used to get in trouble talking growing up, and I share this with him because, again, like I said, he has learning differences. Yeah. And I said to him, I used to get in trouble talking all the time, and today I get paid to speak. Right. So when you can take these stories about yourself, and for you, it might be something different. Perhaps you're an introvert and you believe that you can't be a leader if you're an introvert because you don't live up to that kind of, culture, like you need to be loud and gregarious and whatnot. But if you see, again, how your introvertedness, what gift does that cultivate for you? Maybe that's thoughtfulness. There are a lot of organizations that could use a thoughtful leader. As opposed to somebody who, again, performs and says and can speak well on stage. Because if you want true lasting impact, that's a really powerful trait to have.
Yeah. Oof. Oh my God. I'm still, that your sentence about like, I needed to take up more space. Like that's what your activism is. Like that's still echoing in my head. So I'm sure I'm not alone in this. All right. So we have about 8 minutes left in today's session before we need to go on to our next chat. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask Dr. Swetza, please feel free to share it in the chat. It's going to be on the right-hand side of the screen in front of you. And we will be asking her as many questions as we can get to before the time runs out today. All right. So to touch on what you were just talking about, you talked about kind of having courage. One of the things that's kind of a theme is that you think that courage is more important than hard work to really create work that you love. Can you kind of expand on that and explain what you mean by it?
Yes. I mean, so we've talked a lot about kind of how so much of us have been embedded with the idea of hard work, right? Coming from the Industrial Revolution, where it was all about productivity. And so a lot of us measure our worth based on our productivity. But we live in a different era now. We live in a time of technology and innovation, and impact, I believe, really comes from being able to do hard things as opposed to hard work. And doing hard things, to me, come from like the examples that I just shared, taking your brilliance out of the shadow, right? Showing up for yourself, speaking into truth, the ideas that you have. And, courage comes from the root word core, the French, root word core, which comes from that heart space, right? I mean, I remember when I was, in faculty meetings, I used to, because of that whole idea of like, don't talk, don't take up too much space, I used to like hold back my thoughts and I would hold back my ideas. But when I did the work to cultivate the courage, and courage is a muscle. Okay. Courage is a muscle. The brain loves familiarity. So, everybody here has created certain, what I call archetypes. I mentioned some of them: perfectionism, people pleasing, overperforming, to protect ourselves, right? To protect our image and to keep us safe. And if you choose to do something that kind of rubs up against it, we get afraid. The brain is going to freak out. Right. Yes. But when you are, commit to being a leader, when you follow a path of courage, when you follow a path of a growth mindset, that that's part of the equation. That the brain is going to, get activated. The nervous system is going to get activated when you're following your heart and how your heart is trying to guide you. Mm-hmm. And so part of being, I think, a good leader is to resource yourself for resilience. Instead of being afraid of being afraid.
Yes.
Right. Instead of assuming that you should never have self-doubt and have worry. That is ridiculous. This idea that we need to deny our humanity. Like, that's why I think we have so many of the problems that we have in the world today. When this is how the brain works. This is how it is. We fear uncertainty, we fear unknown, and you create resilience by knowing what helps you to be able to overcome and do hard things as opposed to doing hard work, right? Yeah. Part of doing hard things might be to not work so hard, to actually let yourself rest and let yourself relax, to be able to say no. And to understand you're going to have feelings when this happens.
Yeah.
So how can you resource yourself? Perhaps you have, again, if you're somebody who tends to isolate when you feel self-doubt or scared or questioning yourself, it would be about being vulnerable and instead engaging, having a friend, talking to a coach, being part of a community to help you to move through those, to move that, having some daily practices. I keep a journal. When I first kind of changed professions, I kept a journal of how many times a log of, not feeling good, but still taking action and something positive from happening from it. Mm-hmm. And that built up this idea in my mind that I don't actually have to feel good to do a hard thing, right? That like, if I just do it, it's amazing that your nervous system actually then changes because you find out that you've survived that. The first time you speak up for yourself, the first time you ask for help, it's like, oh my God, it's so scary. But when you have the courage to move through that, then suddenly your nervous system resets and it doesn't become as uncomfortable. It's truly a muscle that you can build.
Oof, I love this. I mean, it very much reminds me of something my mom always tells me. It's that, let's see, what is it? Scared is how you feel, brave is what you do. Ooh. And so it's the idea that like, you can like, yeah, that's a scary thing to do. That's scary. It's okay. You feel scared because it's a scary thing because it's, it's new or it's unfamiliar or whatever. But yeah, like that idea of it's okay to be afraid. You don't have to be like, Courage the Cowardly Lion or something, you know what I mean? Like you don't have to have this kind of Superman swagger to be able to try these things.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that.
I think it's about embracing the fear instead of saying like, there's all this stuff out there about like, screw fear and all that kind of stuff. I think fear is a part of who we are. It's our intuition too. Sometimes our fear tells us like, that's actually not the right path for you. Yeah. That's performing. And what you really want is this, so when we take, again, time, it always comes back to that pause to like listen to ourselves and to reflect and meet ourselves with curiosity. It's incredible. Like the empowerment that it gives you, because then you have choice and you're not habitually reacting just to like stay comfortable.
Oh, for sure. All right. So we have 2 minutes left. I want to make sure we end on time. So we stay on the schedule for today's summit. But last question I have, where do you recommend people start? Especially if somebody's sitting here watching this chat and thinking like, I have no idea what I love to do. I have no idea what I want. I have no idea what lights me up at work. Where do you suggest people start?
This is a super common situation that I have with a lot of my clients. It was my own, like for the longest time, I would read books and they'd be like, follow your passion. And I'm like, I don't know what my passion is. And so, as I mentioned to you, I wrote a book called I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For Now What? And there's 21 questions. And the first chapter, and you can go to my website, drswetachawla.com/fly. And you will get a copy of that you can download a free e-copy of it as well. You also get my 7 mistakes blogs and a training about how to thrive as a natural leader, where I talk about the natural leadership model. So you'll get a lot of ideas from there. But the very first step that I would start with is to really there's 2 things. You look at your current job or your past job and look at where did you really, and this is a body thing, right? This is not a mental thing. This is like, where did you really feel alive? Where did you feel like the task, the work that you were doing was energy giving? And it's not just about like, you completed a task, but like you were actually doing it and you were like, wow, time slows down. This comes back to specificity, right? So not just like I was talking to somebody, right? But maybe like, what was I talking to them about? What was the environment that I was in, et cetera. And the other place that you can do is like, if you're not currently working or you can't find that inquiry in my book, is to look at the people you admire and identify what are the qualities that they have. Like it's not about being the person, but what's like the qualities underneath it.
And I like that.
Yeah, it's incredibly insightful, because then you start to see like where, that's the curiosity of like, okay, well, if for example, in my book, and I'm outing myself here, I talked about the Kardashians, and I was like, I love how brave they are. They don't question themselves. They take risks. And I knew that's what I needed to go towards, taking more risk in doing, putting myself out there for things that I wanted. And so taking that time to just, again, look for internal data as opposed to we're going external, but for the purposes of looking internally.
Oh, Excellent. Sweta, Dr. Sweta, I should say, thank you so much for joining us today. This was wonderful, and the time always goes way too quickly. I've shared the link to your website with our audience. And I just want to say huge thank you. This has been wonderful to get to spend the morning, or sorry, the afternoon chatting with you. And I really hope that we get to connect again.
Absolutely. I love connecting with people. That's one of my top values. So I'm Dr. Sweta Chawla on my website, on LinkedIn, Instagram, everywhere. So please connect. And if you go to drswetachawla.com/fly, you can even book a clarity call with me, and you put in the word gift, and it'll be complimentary. Because like I said, I love supporting people, and I love connecting with people.
Heck yes. Thank you for that.